our comms. Right?
Yeah. And they have the equipment to do that.
Yes, and the training.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Mostly.
There it is. So that's going. Click on the browser. Give it a minute.
Well, and we can talk briefly about the governors. You know, we're yellow now.
Oh, yeah. We should start with that because that's happy. Or maybe end with it.
Yeah, either way. Maybe both.
It's a bookend.
It's a
There
bookend.
it is. Now it came up something that you do preview. Oops, something went wrong.
I have a headache. I should have ate something.
Yes, you should have.
Refresh this. Okay. Do you guys need water? You guys good?
Nah, we're
I'm
good.
good.
Okay.
Food, she could use food. 2 minutes.
That'd be 1 minute.
2
1 minute.
minutes.
1 minute.
1 minute. That's even worse. Like 50% cut in time.
Oh.
You're tuned to KSJE, Farmington, New Mexico, 90.9 FM. And now 103.3 FM, K277CR, Durango, Colorado.
We have a 911. Armed robbery in progress. See surplus store corner Peoples Drive, North 24th Street.
Howdy. Welcome to the Cop Shop with FPD. I'm your host, Chief Steve Hebbe. With you as always, and with me as always, is our new red-headed P.I.O. Look at her dashingly red-headed Nicole.
Thanks, Teresa.
So shout out to Teresa. She looks great. She's feeling on top of her game today.
That's right.
We've got a good show for you today. We're going to talk about a wide variety of things from the governor's new order and some good news finally for businesses starving here in San Juan County. They get to open back up to a limited degree. And we're going to move on to talk some legislation and some of the things going on in Santa Fe. Things you should be interested in and know about as a taxpayer and as a voter. And we'll finish off, probably Scott is going to do his rendition of the Buffalo Bills fight song as they move into free agency. So it's going to be an exciting show.
I can't wait.
You can't wait. Anyone but you singing is good to go,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, that's how I feel.
That's right. So we'll start with the good news, which I think came Wednesday, didn't it?
My week all runs together, so I don't know exactly what day, but yeah, we moved up to yellow.
Yes, which is 25% opening for restaurants. Indoor dining is permissible now. For those of you that haven't done that in forever.
Is it 25% or 33%?
I am not sure. I thought it was 25.
33 if they do the New Mexico safe training.
Okay, so if they do the
25
safe
if they
training,
don't. Okay.
they get 33. If they don't, they get 25. Okay.
Ask an expert. Call in, and
know.
we'll ask Scott for you.
I know.
and
I
give you a
didn't. I
chance.
missed your COVID show this week, Scott.
Yes.
That's why I didn't know.
So sadly, we were both wrong, but Scott was able to combine our wrong answers and make it right. So that's good.
Exciting.
So that is good.
I can't wait.
It has been a while for indoor dining. You know, I ate at Fiesta Mexicana the other day. They've got the outdoor, you know.
The indoor outdoor.
The indoor
like,
outdoor, yeah. It
Yeah.
was wrapped. The building's wrapped basically, and it was okay. You know, it wasn't
Yeah.
bad. It was a little cool, but wasn't too bad. So I look forward to just normally going into a restaurant and sitting and eating. I'm sure most of our citizens do too.
Yeah. Well, and just to have a little bit of social interaction. You know, like to have that just normal kind of outside of your circle interaction is going to be so exciting.
Yes.
We're social animals, human beings are, and so this has just been so difficult.
Well, I'm really not, but
You
so it really
are.
hasn't changed much.
But like chemically, like the chemicals that it
chemically.
induces, you need social interaction.
Well, you know what I do need? I need everyone across the world to see
What?
these hands.
Why?
You see this green? That is Packer green, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh,
This girl
my
is all about the mighty
goodness.
Pack. Thank you.
I
for
don't.
That.
That's more
Thank you for that.
of like a teal green.
There's
I don't
nothing
feel.
teal about it.
I don't feel like that was not intentional.
Well, I'm proud of her.
I
you know,
apologize.
and I know all of our
Apologize.
listeners are proud of her as well. And,
Oh, good.
on the other hand, her job will be open next week, so we can start sending in applications.
As it is every week, and somehow I still manage to
Yeah,
to be employed.
it does seem to defy reason, doesn't it? Legislation. We're about the halfway point now through the legislative session. It's a
Yeah.
60-day session this year, which means we've got about 4 weeks left. And I can tell you, I am looking very much forward to the end of the legislative session.
It's been a rough one
It's
for
been a rough one.
police, just in general, which, the national climate is wanting that, I think that reform and change and we're not opposed to reform, like we've talked about before several times. We're not opposed to meaningful police reform because every good industry wants to be better and wants to serve, whoever it is that they serve, in our case, the community, better. But sometimes when people outside of the problem try to create solutions, they're maybe not the most optimal solutions. So,
Which is a very polite way of saying that people that don't really know what they're talking about are trying to divine solutions to things they don't really understand. And that almost always works out poorly.
yeah. Well, and not all the bills are bad. There's one in there that I think has potential to really make meaningful reform, and that's Senate Bill 375. So, and you know more about this bill than I do.
We do. So that's a bill that the Police Chiefs Association was kind of on the ground floor of working with the Municipal League, and it's carried by a couple of senators, Munoz being the most prominent name that I recall. Engel, I think, is the other one. And the bill deals with several things. First, more fully funding the Law Enforcement Academy to the tune of $6 million a year, getting a revenue stream in. That's something we've been talking about now for at least 6 months. I've been pointing out that the academy, the place where all of our officers get their basic training when they enter the profession, is staffed at about 35 to 40%. They don't have the funding, they can't hire the people, and we're then surprised that the training isn't going that well and that we're having problems when they get out of the academy. So, more fully funding the Law Enforcement Academy is a big one. It also splits off the Academy Board and creates a new board to handle the decertification process. So that's, again, something we've been talking about, that the accountability component at the state level has just been, the Attorney General described it in a KOB interview as just a complete train wreck. I don't disagree with that. They had a backlog of cases, over 100 officers sitting waiting to see if their license was going to be pulled. Meanwhile, they could still continue to be cops if they wished to. Until that decision's made. So we need something that's faster, that streamlines the process, and both the employee and the cities that employ them come to find out whether or not they really do get to still be a police officer. So I'm actually excited about 375 because it goes to the core. If we're going to reform things, it starts with the training and it ends with the decertification and the accountability component. And 375 is almost alone among the bills in dealing with those issues.
Yeah, and that is one of the things that I think people who want reform in policing, they want better training. And so the best way to do that for officers to be better trained is you have to fund it and you have to staff that facility. So I think that it is a good bill in that it addresses that issue, and then holding people accountable and creating a board that specifically holds officers accountable that have violated law or policy or whatever the case is. And so I think that that it addresses both those issues really well, and hopefully it gets some legs and does well in the legislative session.
It passed out of its first committee in the Senate last week. This is a fair amount of what I'm doing these days. I sit on Zoom meetings and testify in front of legislative committees. I'll be doing it again this afternoon on another bill, HB4, which we've talked about quite a bit. HB4 did pass out of the Senate, or out of the House, I'm sorry, really along party lines. I think 3 Democrats voted against it, so it wasn't quite a straight party vote, but it was a significant cushion for HB4. HB4 deals with qualified immunity. And strips qualified immunity essentially away from all government workers at every level throughout government, from local, county, and state, and allows more lawsuits in state court. It's now today being heard in the Senate. It'll be the first round in the Senate, and it's actually, it really won't impact our day-to-day operations at the police department. That's why I've been so vocal that this is pseudo-reform at best. It doesn't really change anything. It really will not change the way we do business in almost any way, except if you're a taxpayer. You will pay a lot more, and I think the conservative estimate has been around 60% more lawsuits they expect into state courts. So who's paying for those lawsuits? Well, it's going to be the taxpayers. On top of it, I was listening or reading an article from some of the plaintiff attorneys that are in support of it, and not surprisingly, plaintiff attorneys are wildly in support of it. And the comment was along the lines of cities will now be incentivized to settle these cases early to try and minimize the loss. So in other words, if we just threaten that you're going to suffer so badly, we can basically strong-arm you into an early settlement, even if you should be defending yourself, because you just can't take the risk. So that is just, it's stunning to me in America that we're at a time period where we're saying, if we just had more lawsuits, everything would be better.
Well, and
I mean, just conceive of that for a moment. If we could just sue more people, things are going to be so much better.
And that's something that, like, coming back to meaningful reform, just being able to sue people doesn't hold them accountable. And that's something that I don't know if people understand. Money, them losing money, or taxpayers having to pay that money, whoever pays it, it doesn't matter. Money doesn't hold people accountable. Right. And so that, you know, a lawsuit isn't going to, oh, they learned their lesson now because they had to pay $1 million. No, they probably didn't. They probably just think they're taking it as, you know, an insult instead of learning from the incident. And so
and we're holding the cities accountable. We're not holding the individuals accountable.
Yeah, the individuals. Right. Is that, yeah.
So you strip qualified immunity from individuals, but we're not suing individuals. The city still pays. So taxpayers are still wind up being on the hook.
And I saw an interesting quote about qualified immunity that I don't think a lot of people understand about it. You have to qualify to get the immunity. So you have to have not violated someone's rights.
Right.
In order to be protected by qualified immunity. So to take it away doesn't necessarily guarantee that, you know, now everyone's going to not violate anyone's rights.
Right.
You have to not violate rights in order to be protected by qualified immunity. And I don't know if a lot of people understand that about in that argument about qualified immunity.
Well, and there's, you know, honestly, we're 30 days in, so I can tell you I'm tired and more than a little depressed about the way all this is going, but not too tired and depressed to point out the unbelievable hypocrisy of we've got part-time legislators, so senators and representatives are not full-time. That means they have other jobs, and then they come to the Senate once a year or the House once a year, and they pass laws and write laws. But in this case, many of the people that are passing and writing these laws are attorneys. Some of them are plaintiff attorneys. So, you know, where's the ethics in going and passing laws that you are directly going to profit from? I can tell you, we're on our officers about ethics. We're on our officers and investigate and discipline our officers for a wild variety of things. So it leaves me head shaking when you don't have a single chief or sheriff, not one, across this state that supports this measure, HB4. But it's wildly popular with attorneys, particularly plaintiff attorneys, And some of them are the ones writing the law in the first place. I mean, how is that? So we talk about lobbying at the national level, that you can't lobby directly after you get out of being, but in this case, you're actually lobbying for stuff that you're directly going to profit from at the same time. I really do not understand it. So if you can explain that one to me and settle me down, I'd appreciate it.
No, and the things that I'm thinking probably would rile you up even more. So
There you
I
go.
just won't say anything.
You know, I do notice that this has
I don't
almost
know
the same hair
why.
color that Nicole does. See that? Look at, and if you put
Those
you put
little
her up,
things distract
right
me. You
there.
can't bring those out. I forget my train of thought jumps the tracks, and it's always bad whenever.
So
I
the
see
last one is SB 227, which there was an article in the Farmington Daily Times on. I didn't really love some of the headline that was online about it. 227 is a wild, far-reaching bill that seeks to limit the use of force by police in ways that it's actually shocking, and it's about 10 steps back from where we've been going over the last 20, 25 years. When I first got into policing, we didn't have tasers. We were just barely getting pepper spray when I got on in the early 1990s. But those were less lethal tools. SB 227 takes aim at a lot of these less lethal tools that we've been using. Won't allow you to use rubber bullets, won't allow you to use gas, won't allow you to use tasers, won't except in extreme circumstances. Restricts to almost, well, I guess it totally bans canines as far as biting. You could still have canines like Old Yeller that track.
scent and track. Yeah.
Scent, but that isn't going to do the dog a whole lot of good when you release it into a building and there's a burglar in there and the dog isn't trained to fight. The dog finds him. He knows the dog found him, and now he shoots the dog, which actually happens across our country quite a bit, and that's to dogs that actually are capable of defending themselves. So it's actually a very shocking bill. Because you're leaving the police with fewer and fewer options, and that'll drive up the number of officer-involved shootings that you have. There's no other way around it. The cops are either going to start going home more often, which we already do. We walk away from many calls that we never used to walk away from because we don't want to induce these kind of confrontations. But that's when we still have other tools in our tool bag, like tasers and gas, that we can use to try and end them. When you take those tools away, it becomes an either-or. Either we're leaving or we're going to wind up in a shooting. So it's just it kind of goes to the HB4 and what we were talking about of who is passing these. Again, I can't see a single chief or sheriff. I have not met one yet that is in favor of this bill. But yet it's wildly pushed. It did pass out of its first committee. It was 4-3, so it was pretty split. I don't know the composition on it, whether all Dems supported it and all Republicans opposed it, or if there was a cross section of both. But you know, it did pass its first committee. We'll see what happens with it, but folks, this one will be a game changer. Where HB4 really will not change much of what we do in policing, this one will change what we do in policing, and it will not be for the better. It will be more dangerous for our officers. It will be more dangerous for the citizens that we're in contact with in these calls, and it will be several steps back from a move that had us using more or less lethal tools to try and handle things without shootings, to taking away those tools and giving us few options left.
And when you talk about use of force, you know, I thought I kind of knew about it when I worked at dispatch, and I knew a little bit about policing. But as I have transitioned to work with the PD and have learned so much more, there's so much to a good use of force policy and a good breakdown of when officers can use force. How do you define use of force and all of that, and I really feel like this bill doesn't take into account that several police departments have really done a lot of progressive work to define those things and make their officers more conscious about those things. And so even, you know, less lethal options are really thought out, and really, you know, the officers are conscious about when they use them and how they use them. And so that really moves a police agency forward to take it very seriously. And a bill like this that takes away those less lethal options, like you said, it narrows the scope, but it also doesn't help your officers think about those things. And I honestly would like officers to, if I'm in contact with someone like in a situation, I want them to be thinking about how they're going to react. And so when you narrow that, then there's less that happening, I think,
Yes.
on the officer's end, and I don't think that it's meaningful reform.
No, it's the limitations of taser and some of the dangers of it. In some cases, right, we've had people killed by tasers and the way the officers tase them, and I get some of those, and those aren't good. But it's also a wildly ineffective tool at times. So we think that it's always going to work, but you've got a leather jacket on here. Definitely in Alaska, it would be a thicker leather jacket, and if the prongs of the taser don't penetrate that to get into the skin, then it doesn't do anything. It doesn't stop the subject. So, in particular in winter, it was a less valuable tool for us because it would oftentimes wasn't effective. But it's also hard. Both prongs have to hit, and so if a subject's moving and running or fighting, it just does not always work. I think we got into believing that this tool always will work, and any time it did not work, it was assumed the officer deliberately made sure that it didn't work. Which is just stunning.
Well, and you oftentimes will see in officer-involved shootings, they will go to the taser first,
right?
And the taser failed, or the subject was, on drugs and didn't feel it, or whatever happened, and so officers are using non-lethal first, but it doesn't always work,
right?
And so they have to be able to have all those tools in their tool belt. And I think a lot of training about how to transition between tools, depending on, what's coming at them, is really important. And that goes back to Senate Bill 375 and increasing training and the budget and the checks and balances of that.
A very good point. We had an incident here this last week out at the mall where a security guard who wound up using pepper spray, I think, to limited effectiveness, but she was confronted by a subject who had a knife. Another citizen stepped in from behind, grabbed the subject, and attempted to wrestle him into some sort of custody until police could get there. And he was stabbed several times by the subject with a knife. And it goes to, these are the things that our officers are facing on the street. And honestly, here in Farmington, we face it so much more than our citizens know, that our officers are in confrontations with people who are armed, and things go well. Our officers are trained, they de-escalate, they talk them down, or we use less lethal tools, and we're able to take them into custody. In this case, the subject, and I talked with him while he was still in the hospital. He's doing well. He is expected to be released. It may already be released today already. And I'm proud of him for stepping in and trying to help, but it comes at a great danger to yourself, and then it also highlights this is what our officers face. You're trying to do the best you can, and it used to be the best you can was really all we could ask of people, and now we seem to want perfection. And I can tell you, we won't get perfection out of anybody. So if that's the standard, we're in trouble. But I know our officers do the best they can every day to resolve situations just like this peacefully, and they are largely and wildly successful at it, but it doesn't always work.
We have really great professional officers. Every time I kind of delve into body cameras to see if there's anything I put out, I'm always just so pleasantly surprised, because I know they're professional. I deal with them all the time, and I know that they're really great at their job and they're being professional, but every time I watch them, I'm always blown away at just the craziness that they face every day and how amazingly well they do, and the respect that they treat citizens with, and even if they get into fights with people, they're still so respectful. Yeah. And so our officers are great, and I'm very proud of them. So
actually, to circle back to HB4, we have job openings at the Farmington PD right now, no doubt about it. If you're a plaintiff attorney and you know something about policing, come on, join the show. We'd love to have you. I know this much. I will promise you will make about 1/10 of what you make right now as a police officer for FPD. That our officers, although we're paid pretty well, we're not touching what plaintiff attorneys are making. I will tell you that. For anybody else, both positive and negative in general about policing, we do have job openings. We probably need 10 good people right now, 10, to step forward and come join our department. It is a good department.
It is.
We do have strong public support. We do have good funding. We are getting good training. We do have good policies. We have a good reputation. We have the best PIO in the business, and with that new red hair, it's unbelievable. So, you know, this is the time. This is an important time in policing, and this is the time we need you to step forward. You know, it's easy to sit in the back row and talk about what the police should do. It's harder to actually strap on your uniform and come into work every day and try and do the best you can. And so I invite you to come out. I've been at it for 30 years. I don't regret a single day of it. I regret some of the conversations around it that I'm forced to have, and maybe a little of the narrative right now. But it is a great profession. You will be making a difference for your community, and you will have meaning in when you come to work. So we have openings. We need 10 good ones. Think about it and come join us.
Yeah. With that, I mean, I can't say anything else. I say we sign off, and thanks for tuning in.
Thank you. See you in a couple of weeks.
Broadcasting from San Juan College, this is KSJE Farmington.